Ontario Education Online students, and welcome to your lesson about evolution. We are going to be talking about Charles Darwin, of course, but we're also going to be talking about the different humans or previous forms of humans, the precursors to what we know as Homo sapiens, who we are today. So let's begin with our slideshow. I'm going to share my screen with you. All right. So in search of our past, the story of human evolution. So we will begin with the theory of evolution, and Charles Darwin was the main person. As you can see here on the left side, is the main person who began this idea of evolution. It suggests that there were a variety of plant and animal life, but that over time, things developed through a natural process where some skills or characteristics remain, but other characteristics fall away. And he wrote, his most important book was on the origin of species by means of natural selection. It was published in 1859, and this was as a result of his studying his collection of fossils and plants and animals, and it led him to doubt that divine creation had brought all the species of living things into existence. So his doubts really challenged the traditional theories that were held for centuries by creationists. Now, the idea of natural selection says that species change or adapt over time in response to their environment. He based this on observations of single species that he saw that varied in size, shape, and color, and most of these variations seem to be inherited. But he also noticed that some of the species tended to stay in size, even though the parents usually produced more than a few offspring. So he concluded, therefore, there must be some sense of competition for survival. And in this struggle, the stronger characteristics will survive, and the other ones will likely die out. And those organisms that had the useful characteristics will survive, reproduce, pass along those good genes or good characteristics, and the other variations would die out. So he called this process natural selection. He also believed that natural selection had other effects as well. He said that many newly developed organisms remained in their own habitats and crowded older forms out of existence, but other new organisms made their way into new surroundings, and therefore there was a steady succession of new species that were best suited to the different environments. So we'll say that there's a new modern version of Darwin's theory called neo-Darwinism, and this suggests that the evolution proceeded really rapidly at different times in history, and at other times rather very slowly. Now, he did not ever in his writings profess that his writings provided proof of evolution or of the origin of species. Only the thing that he did propose was that the theory of evolution might help to explain a number of mysterious facts about plants and animals. But later on, we do have two later scientific developments that give the theory credibility. First, when we look at the science of genetics, it does explain how there are variations of each species and how these variations pass on. And secondly, when we do look at evidence gathered from fossils, we can see that some of their evidence there does support Darwin's ideas. However, because this is a wide variety of history, a large amount of time passes, there are gaps in the history, so we don't have a complete record of human evolution. Just as an example, if we want to talk about the dodo bird, used to have wings like birds. Birds have wings. Birds can fly. However, when it was living on Mauritius, when it arrived into Mauritius, the island of Mauritius is in the middle of the Indian Ocean, there were no known predators for the dodo bird. And so over time, over many, many, many years, the need to have to fly away from your enemy was no longer there. So over time, the dodo bird developed and changed to not have very big wings and therefore could no longer fly. Fast forward, we have new peoples arriving to the island, right? People who are traveling and exploring, the conquistadors, they're coming to different lands, and they land on Mauritius and they bring with them their animals and their other kinds of pets, etc., that could potentially be predators for the dodo bird. Now, the dodo bird can't fly. The dodo bird can't fly because its wings aren't built to do that. And it can't develop quick enough to be able to fly. So they go extinct. So this is how the dodo bird goes extinct. Just an example how over time the characteristics tend to fall off because it's no longer needed, but then when it is needed, there you go. It's now extinct, right? Okay, now for humans, there are traces of human development through several stages where we start talking about, the beginning of, say, where we diverge from apes and who our initial ancestor is. We do know that hominids began to appear about 4 million years ago, and they distinguish from apes mostly because they were able to be on 2 feet. Bipedalism, they're able to walk on 2 feet, and their brain was larger. So all hominids are members of the human family tree. So when we look at here, we have the Australopithecus ramidus, right? The Australopithecus afarensis. Here's our Homo habilis, Homo sapiens, and we are here Homo sapiens sapiens. Now, Andropithecus ramidus, we start from here. Our understanding of human evolution is constantly changing. This new genus of Australopithecus ramidus shows that there are chimp-like characteristics as well as human features, but we're not really sure where to put it on the family tree. So it's kind of like a mystery to be solved. The Australopithecines family, the Australopithecines anamensis, in 1995, Maeve Leakey of the National Museum of Kenya discovered some of the oldest representatives of this human genus, the Australopithecines. She and her team located a bipedal hominid that's dated 4.1 million years ago. And it's an early species with very pronounced ape-like teeth. Some suggest it gave rise to the next Australopithecus afarensis. And if you look at this particular skull, it's very similar to a human skull. The Australopithecus afarensis in 1974, Donald Johanson discovers in Ethiopia the fossilized bones of a female hominid that's approximately 3.18 million years old. And they nicknamed her Lucy. And when they actually showcase her full skeleton, I believe it was less than 4 feet tall. But these fossilized bones led to the identification of the Australopithecus afarensis. And it seems like that species survived for over 900,000 years. The Australopithecus africanus is another branch that's supposed to be dated about 2.5 million years to 3 million years ago. And there are a couple of lines that come off of it. But if you take a look at the shape of the skull, very similar in terms of the back end being larger, the shape for the eyes and the nose. But then over here on this particular one, you can see that the jawline is more ape-like. Now, in terms of the evolution of human beings, we have to also look at the time frames. So in the Stone Age, we have 3 different stages: the Paleolithic or Old Stone Age, which is about 2 million years ago to 10,000 BCE. The Mesolithic means Middle Stone Age, Meso meaning middle, about 10,000 BCE to 8,000 BCE. And then the Neolithic is the New Stone Age from 8,000 BC to 5,000 BCE. And so humans who live in the Stone Age are generally classified into a group or genus called Homo, meaning man, according to these stages. And, one of the things about human beings in terms of evolution that makes the human being different than ape is the ability to use tools such as these below to generate, to hunt or to generate fire or to make things, right? Okay. In search of Homo sapiens, we have the next is the Homo habilis, which is considered to be the handyman. And this is the first hominid to develop and use stone tools as proof of their creativity and ingenuity about 2.5 million years ago. The brain size suggests that the Homo habilis might have been our human ancestor, and also the way the teeth are. Many think that the habilis bridges the gap between the Australopithecines and the Homo sapiens, but we're not entirely sure because, there are many millions of years in between and thousands of years in between, so we're not entirely sure of everything. But when we do look at skeletons, we can see similarities in things. Now, Homo erectus first appeared about 2 years ago, and their name refers to what it is they could do. So this is the first group that could actually stand and walk completely upright like modern humans. There's only been a few dozen skulls like this that have been found, and some of them were found in Java. They call it because of where it was found, and they're about 700,000 years old. But they're the first species to use fire and to migrate from into Europe from Asia and Africa. So again, when we look at these skulls and even the skeleton, you can see that it's very similar to the modern day human, although the skull of this one has a more pronounced forehead bone. All right, so the Homo heidelbergensis lived approximately 500,000 years ago. It is often referred to as the archaic Homo sapiens sapiens because it combines some of the modern features of today with the Homo erectus. The first species was found in Germany in 1907, but it's been since found in other places throughout Europe and Northern Africa. And it's possibly an ancestor for the modern humans of Homo sapiens and of Neanderthals. But not everybody's very comfortable classifying this as such, because again, some of the evidence is there, but some of it's not 100%. Okay, so here's the skulls and some of the remnants of skeleton remnants discovered. Now, the word Homo sapiens means man who thinks, which is an appropriate title because now at this point, they're using more sophisticated and developing more sophisticated tools. The most ancient find that was discovered in Hungary in 1965 dates about 450 to 400,000 years ago. Other remains have been found in other parts of Europe like England, Germany, and France. And there are two types of Homo sapiens. We have Neanderthals, the Homo neanderthalis, and the modern human, which is the Homo sapiens sapiens. So Neanderthals are located in Europe. They first appeared 230,000 years ago and possibly disappeared around 30,000 years ago. They traveled as far as China and the Middle East, and at one point they might have numbered about 100,000. It is still unclear who the Neanderthals were. Scientists wonder whether they were our direct ancestor or whether they were separate species. But it is commonly held that they were driven to extinction by the modern human. Now, you know, when people call each other Neanderthal, it's interesting because it's almost like calling a name for your family member, like we're coming from the same line, right? But people use that in a negative connotation. So the modern human came around about 40,000 years ago, moved into Europe. Now they are armed with better skills to make clothing, shelter. And 19th century scientists named these newcomers Cro-Magnon people after the French rock shelter, where they found 3 anatomically modern skeletons. They discovered this in 1868. So it is said that they evolved from Africa in Africa and slowly pushed their way into Europe, and eventually developed the ability to handle colder climates, especially in Greenland. They were about as tall as modern Northwestern Europeans, and they had many of the same facial and features, very much the same. And then a lot of their ancestors moved into Asia as well. And then from there, they crossed the Bering Strait over this ice and then ended their ways into the Americas. Others reached Australia. So this is part of how the migration happened with the modern human ancestors and how they spread throughout the world. So if you take a look here, remember when Pangea existed and it was all connected, they could travel and make their ways through to many different places. You can see many went in around Africa, the others went to Australia in 40,000, 33,000 BCE. Others went to Asia, etc., right? And again, if you take a look at the skulls, you'll notice that they're very similar. The Homo sapiens and the Homo neanderthalis, very similar types of skulls. As you move further back down towards the beginning of the Australopithecines, you'll notice, wider cheeks, more protruding jaws, because the needs of the people at the time were different. If you're eating mostly meat, you're going to need to have bigger jaws to be able to grasp the meat, to chew it, to clamp down on it, right? Just like you would need bigger teeth, stronger, sharper teeth to do that. But over time, if the way you're eating changes, then again, the characteristics start to move away and shift away from that. Okay, so again, there was a time, for example, even with human beings where there was a need for an appendix. But now, today, is there a need for an appendix? No. But do we have an appendix? Yes. But some people, like, when you have it removed, nothing happens to you. It's like it doesn't affect you either way because it's not useful. Like, we don't use the appendix for anything specific. But there was a point many, many, many years ago when that would have been useful, or we did use it. So again, even human beings, we're developing and modifying, and we're shedding certain characteristics and we're gaining new ones. Okay, so that is our lesson on evolution. I hope that explains a little bit to you and showcases a little bit about our beginnings in time. So as always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and we will talk in the next lesson. Have a great day.